And Shabbat Shalom. I kind of figured if you're the kind of Jew who comes to Shul 48 hours after Yom Kippur is over, either you're a kid who has a certain number of Shabbatot you have to be here for, or you're real dedicated. And if you're this dedicated, I figure you are more or less familiar with the next holiday we have coming up, which is Sukkot. See, you already knew the name. That's how I know you're so dedicated. So I figured, and I was not writing any more sermons. No offense to you. I'm sermoned out right now. So if I was going to teach about something Sukkot related, if you're in this room right now, you've got a good handle. Okay, what a sukkah is, how many walls it needs, what goes on top. That would be boring to go over that. So I thought, what about just letting me be the nerdy little rabbi that I am, and let's talk about sukkah alternatives, or more specifically, alternative sukkahs. Because it's amazing what you can build a sukkah out of. I didn't realize this until I was in rabbinical school, which is where all the nerdy little Jews go to learn and become more nerdy. Correct? Yes, he knows. The basics of what goes into building a sukkah, you can see at the top. You know this already, because where do we get this commandment? Where does the mitzvah building a sukkah come from? Thank you, the Torah. Yes, A+. Because the Torah says you shall observe it being Sukkot, a festival of Adonai for 7 days in the year. You will observe it in the 7th month, a law for all time throughout the ages, so forever. You shall live in booths, and I made it bold, Sukkot, for 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths in order that future generations may know that I, God speaking, I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I, Adonai, your God. Okay, so there you go. You gotta build a dwelling, a sukkah, a booth, and you gotta live in it. That's what the Torah says. But the rabbis, more or less 2,000 years ago, had a bit of a problem. They looked at the Torah and they said, this is all well and good, but it doesn't tell us how to do any of this stuff. There's no instructions, and there's so many ways this could go. And there's a reason most of us are lawyers this day, because our brains just work in this way. We go, okay, well, let's find all the little intricacies and nuance and minutia. What if, every rabbi says, but if, what if, what if? So, in the Mishnah 2,000 years ago, the rabbis say, okay, about this whole sukkah thing, where exactly can you build your sukkah? What can you build it out of? Now, if I asked you, where do you build a sukkah, what would you tell me? Backyard, someone said between here and the other, yes, in the sukkah courtyard we have here, called the sukkah courtyard. Your driveway, you could do it in a driveway. If you had the right kind of balcony in a house, in an apartment, you might be able to pull it off. It's tough to do in a balcony, but you could do. That's what you think. But the rabbis, 2,000 years ago, had other questions about where could you build your sukkah and what could you build it out of. Don't flip ahead to the very last page. I see you cheating. So first they start asking questions that are very relevant to their day. A lot of them traveled for work and not commuting in the car. I'm here where it says, it's giving Dr. Zeus, because this feels very Dr. Zeus to me. It's from the Mishnah. In the case of one who builds or establishes a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a ship, is it kosher? Is it fit? Yes. You can build your sukkah on top of a wagon. You can build your sukkah on top of a ship. You can even climb up into it, like, if it's like a thing, the crow's nest, right? It's all the way up there. You can still build it all the way up there. You can even enter it even on the first day of Chag, because Chag days have most of the same rules as Shabbat. There's a lot of stuff you can't do on Shabbat. But you're allowed to do that. Why? Well, the rabbis reasoned that, yes, this is supposed to be a permanent structure, but we all know, when you're traveling, especially in the days, when they're traveling for work, you're on a ship for many, many months, you're on a wagon for many, many months, that basically becomes your residence. It's basically your home. So they say, yeah, if you got to build your sukkah there, then that's kosher. You're allowed to do that, even if you're not building it on land, on dirt. It still counts, still a kosher sukkah, and you can even climb up into it, which you wouldn't think you could, but you can even do that. Okay. I can see how they got there. That makes sense. It only gets weirder from here, though. In the case of one who establishes a sukkah at the top of a tree, I always imagine a palm tree with just a sukkah just waving at the top. Or on top of a camel. Is it fit? Is it a kosher sukkah? Yes, you can. But you can't climb onto it in the first day of the Chag. Okay, hold on. So you can build your sukkah on top of a tree, kosher, like treehouse sukkah. You can do it, but you can't climb into it. Why? Well, because you can't climb that high. You're leaving your boundary or it's a home. You can't do that on Shabbat. You cannot build a sukkah on top of, you can build a sukkah on top of a camel, and that's fine, but you can't climb onto your camel sukkah on actual Sukkot, like the first two and last two, or back in their days, the first and last day of the holiday. Why? Because you can't use your animals. Can't use your animals on Shabbat, can't use your animals on Chag. So even though your camel is merely the home of your sukkah, somehow, not kosher. You gotta leave it, it's kosher, but you can't do it on Shabbat because you cannot use your animal. They get a break on Shabbat. Even animals get a break on Shabbat. So you can't be climbing up your camel. You can build your camel sukkah, but you can't use that much. The rabbis go, okay, that's not so bad. By the way, in the Talmud, so like the next step from here, they really just get very confused by this because they say, hold on, how can you make a camel sukkah that doesn't make any sense? Obviously, you would only make an elephant sukkah. Because it's big, kind of makes sense, it's bigger though, right? And they say not building your sukkah on top of it. What if, and this is where this discussion gets really off the rails, what if you just use different things for the walls? Like what if you wouldn't build a sukkah on top of an elephant, but what if you had an elephant be the wall of your sukkah? Would that be kosher? And one guy says, no, you cannot use living animals as walls of a sukkah. And the other guys say, yeah, of course you can, because look at the Mishnah, it says you can use animals. And he's like, no, you can't use animals because what if they run away? Then the wall of your sukkah's run away, and now it's not a kosher sukkah. And the other rabbis say, that's dumb. You just use ropes and bind its legs together so it can't run away. Duh. And the other rabbi, who's like arguing, he's like, what if it dies? Because they just kind of thump to the ground. And the rabbi's, yeah, okay, it's kind of sad that it dies, but, you know, you can still use it. This is a literal conversation they have. And then they say, well, but no, it's not good to use an animal because it could die, and if it dies, we all know that the dead things shrink. And then your wall shrinks for your sukkah, and now it's not a kosher sukkah anymore. You can't make up the Talmud. It's amazing. The whole thing is, this is all to tell you that they're just going to go off and have whole discussions based on discussions, because this is what we do as Jews. We argue. This is what we do. All right, turn the page 2. Now they're getting really, really specific here in the Mishnah. Okay, they say, what if 2 of the walls of your sukkah are in the tree, but one a person built on the ground? Is that okay? And what if 2 of them were on the ground and one was in the tree? Is it still a kosher sukkah? Yes. How does this happen? How does that actually work in real life? I don't know. But in their mind, you could have a sukkah with 2 walls were built on the ground, one wall was built in a tree, but you can't go into it. Why? Because you can't use the tree because it's alive, and that's mean, and we don't use living things on Chag or Shabbat like your animals or your trees. So you can use the tree, even part of the tree, but you can't, can't climb it on Shabbat. You can, I guess, the intermediary days, Chol Hamoed, you could use your partial tree, partial ground sukkah. Okay, what if 3 of the walls, they're just going to keep pushing it. 3 of the walls are established on the ground by a person, so they were built by a person, and 1 of the walls was in a tree. The rabbis say, it's okay because you only need 3 kosher walls, so it's okay to use it. And you can even climb into it on Chag because basically 3 of your 4 walls are kosher and they're on the ground, so it's okay. They think of every possible permutation, and eventually they get tired of arguing. They say, okay, we have to have a general principle. Like, that's like, generally speaking, we know how to build a sukkah. With all these weird, like, what if part of it's in a tree, and part of it's on the ground? What if it's a living animal, and 2 walls are this, and 1 wall is that, or 3 walls are this? The rabbis, they say, here you go, Zehakla. This is the general principle, the rabbis say. Any case where, the second from the bottom, if the tree were removed, and the sukkah could remain standing, in and of itself, like on its own, then it's kosher, it's fit. And you can climb into it, you can send it, and you can go into it, even on Chag, even on the festival day. Because if you took the tree away and the sukkah was still standing up, clearly the tree was not the primary support. So we don't have to worry about, can we climb a tree on Chag or not? Because basically it's standing on its own. Okay, thank God, they established that, it's okay. And then they immediately say, okay, well actually, if you put your sukkah between the trees, and the trees are the walls, it's fine. Which is all to say, there are so many ways to build a kosher sukkah. And they really, I think rabbis want to make it workable for you. They want to make it doable for you. And that's why, if you look at the last page, that's why you can even build your sukkah out of your car. And I've given you instructions with a photo, but not in color because I was cheap. Anyone here drive a minivan? Okay, you're good. Minivan people, this doesn't, you know, I'm so sorry. You don't count for this. It's horrible. But for everybody else, it counts. Okay. And I'm not talking about the Chabad, like the sukkah mobile. That's not the same thing. Because that's them taking a flatbed and slapping a sukkah in the back. That's basically like having a wagon. And can you build your sukkah in a wagon? Yes. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, can you make your car into a kosher sukkah? And based on all those many weird permutations and rules that the rabbis have, even your modern Orthodox poskim will tell you, you can build your car and make it into a sukkah. And here's how you do it. You take your car. If you got one of those big old things, those, I don't know, you know, a Jeep or something really, here in Houston, you kind of have to have a car that's high up off the ground, then you are going to have to park along the curb because you're too high up off the ground. And you can only have your walls have to be within 3 tefachim, so basically 10.5 inches off the ground. So you're going to be too high up. Now, if you're like me and you drive my Shabbat car as this tiny little beater, a VW electric Golf, I'm basically driving on the road. I'm basically driving Fred Flintstone's car. So I'm fine. But y'all with the big cars, you're going to have to park next to the curb because the curb will artificially extend the wall of your sukkah down to the ground. So you're going to pull up against the curb. You got to park your car. If you have a minivan, this is why it doesn't work, because you have to take your car doors and you have to open them on one side, only on one side. So your passenger door and your driver door, as you can see from the photo. You got to open up both those doors. There you go. And if your doors are too far off the ground, you can stuff some pillows. You can do something under there to kind of extend the walls of your sukkah because each door is a wall. And in fact, the rest of your car is the third wall, which is why you can't open the doors on the other side because it has to be a solid wall. So you've got 1, 2, 3 walls, boom. Now what's missing from your sukkah? No, we're not on tables yet. Schach. You gotta put something on top. Now the only real rule about schach, the stuff you put on top, is it has to be a natural material, not attached to its source. So you can't be like, you know, build your sukkah and use a big tree branch that goes over it as the schach because it's still attached to the tree. You have to have like the leaves or boughs or palm fronds, whatever, detached. A lot of us love the bamboo mats because it is natural, but it's also a lot less gross than, you know, a tree raining down like bugs and stuff on you. So if you're driving your car, though, you're not going to have like a bunch of palm frond. Well, maybe you do in the trunk, but probably you don't. So what can you do? Well, this very clever person has just a bundle of bamboo they saran wrapped to the doors of their car. It counts. And the rabbis who make these, Orthodox rabbis who make these kind of rules, they say, okay, that maybe you don't have that, but they say you can get some 2x4s, because what are 2x4s made out of? Wood. Is that natural? Yes. So you get some 2x4s, and it doesn't, everyone has the idea that, oh, you have to be able to see the stars. That is not true. But it actually has to have more shade than sun. As long as you have like a sliver of light, you're golden. It's really a very small amount of light has to get through. So you basically just put some 2x4s up there, you slap some other 2x4s on top, or whatever you got. Maybe you do carry around sticks. I don't know what you do in your lives. You need to be able to sit in your sukkah, because you have to be able to sit there and do leshe basukkah and drink your wine, do your kiddush. Now you can't sit in your car, because the car itself is a wall. You can't sit in the wall of your sukkah. So you have to bring, you can see they have a very small folding chair right there. Can you imagine how small it is if you took your car, popped the doors out, and said, that's my sukkah? It's just, you'd sit like this, hunched over, like that. But hey, it's kosher. It counts. And if you were in the car with other people and you were doing this, you have to get out and take turns, going into the sukkah, doing kiddush, next. But you know what? It would count. So if you're ever in a pinch, now you know. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't have to take the chance to do kiddush in my sukkah today. Your car could be a sukkah, as long as it's not a minivan or a motorcycle. So you know, Dell over in the chapel like, hey, I'm like, I'm not answering questions about motorcycles. But you could probably use your motorcycle to make a wall of a sukkah. In rabbinical school, we always found like the 3 biggest guys, and we're like, you could be a sukkah. Just stand. They did it. One person stood here, one stood here, one stood here, and they held a branch over your head. It's a sukkah. Anything could be a sukkah. Point is, I think the rabbis really wanted to make the rules workable for our lives. So it's not that they were finding loopholes. They just wanted to see just how far the laws could stretch and what we could do with them. I think it makes it fun, makes it interesting, and it makes it very realistic. And you know what? Making a car sukkah is a lot more, smells better than making a camel sukkah or an elephant sukkah. So You're welcome for this little bit of information for your next cocktail party. Shabbat shalom.